me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello. You had me at Cello. Oh, you had me at Cello. Hi, everybody. Time for another episode of Cello Chat. And today we get to have on the program Louise Dubin, who has a CD coming out today. This is so excellent timing. I couldn't be more excited. But first of all, Louise, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm a little tired. I was doing a lot of publicity stuff last night until way too late, but it's out there now, so
All right.
there it
Well, and
goes.
I love that you really seem to have your act together. Like the various websites have the information about the premiere on it. It's just it's hard. It's hard enough to prepare a CD and record it and everything like that, but then we also have to make sure to dot the other T's and cross the I's and such. So bravo to you.
Thanks. That's not my favorite part of it, but
No, no, I don't think it's probably anybody's, but it's got to be done.
it has to be done. So it's
So
done.
yeah. Now, it seemed like everybody has at least somewhat of a different story as to how they even got started on the cello in the first place. And then if you can lead us through that and then your
Sure.
very musical studies, we'd love to hear that.
Sure thing. Well, actually, I started on piano when I was 6 because my sister was playing and I really wanted to start, do what she did. I had a very nice piano teacher in my town. And I loved it. Actually, her daughter was a cellist. I didn't have lessons with her officially, but her daughter actually became a professional cellist, Marianne Chen. She lives in Italy now.
Huh.
But I I actually didn't start cello until fourth grade in New Jersey public schools. And it was just kind of a social thing at first, and I got to take it on the school bus, which was very exciting. Um, I don't enjoy carrying it as much anymore, but I used to, because everyone was like, "What is that?" Um, so I mean, people actually still ask that, but it's not as much fun anymore on New York subways and stuff. But yeah, and then I got a really good private teacher, I think in seventh grade, and then things really took off. I had met her at a music festival called Esterwood, which was super fun, a bit impractically. They went to England their final year and then went completely bankrupt because it was so expensive. But we had
Oh,
such a good time there, and there were great teachers there, including Ardith Alton, whom I started to study with privately. And she was great. She was very inspiring and loving and loved music and loved people, and that's just what I needed. So um, I just found it easier than piano for me personally for some reason. So I kind of started focusing on that more in high school, and then my parents really didn't like the idea of my becoming a professional musician because they are not professional musicians. Um, so I was foreign to them and sounded scary. And they wanted me to go into science or something like that, which is what their professions were. But I sort of compromised in a way, and went to Columbia College in New York City where I could study at Juilliard at the same time. So I didn't study, I mean, I did study at Juilliard. I didn't practice that much except in the summers. It was hard. It was just a lot to balance. But I did practice in the summers, and I enjoyed Columbia. I have a lot of other interests, and I ended up not majoring in science, so that part didn't work out and my parents wanted. But I love writing. I wrote a lot there. I hung out at the radio station. They have a 24-hour radio station there, so if you can't fall asleep, it's a great place to go. And there's always someone there to talk to on a couch. So I loved that. And I hosted radio shows there, about string players, usually string players who are no longer alive. And the scratchier the 78 was the better for me. I just was really interested in digging up stuff that nobody had heard for a long time. Uh, and yeah, and then I left because I graduated finally, and I went to music school for real. I took out loans, and I started out at Manus with Tim Eddy, and then I went to IU to study with Deanna Starker, which first I was actually there with Helga Winold for a few months, and then I was with Deanna Starker, who changed my life and my cello playing, and he is someone I think about a lot when I teach.
All right. Outstanding. Wow. Well, I have a number of questions in there already. So,
Okay.
for example, at Columbia, it was it English that you majored in?
Yeah, the name of the degree is comparative literature. So I didn't have to just read things in English. I could read translations of Russian literature or French literature and so on.
And you also did poetry.
I wrote poetry there, yes.
So I'm interested. I have over the years, it seems like I always have at least a couple students whose hearts are in music and another art,
Hmm.
which of course goes great together. And poetry, there's so many art songs, for example, that the poem drives the aesthetic, and
Oh,
the music
absolutely.
reflects that. So I'm just curious as how, like, do you still find the poet in you is fully active when you've got your cello in your hands?
Oh, alas, it's really a different part of my brain. I read so much poetry there. So when you're reading it, it's like when you're hearing music and playing music with other musicians. It's in your blood, and it's just coming out of your pores. That I was reading so much poetry then that my favorite teacher there, Kenneth Koch, who's now passed away unfortunately, but he had us read and then imitate poets, all sorts. From all ages, Spencer even, was actually became one of my favorites.
Hmm.
But, or Shakespeare, was very hard to imitate actually. But, or, modern ones are much easier, like William Carlos Williams. But this is not something that I'm reading a lot of at the moment. So I do occasionally write a poem when I'm moved to do so. When my father was really ill, I wrote poems then. That was maybe the most recent time. Actually, I wrote a poem. There was a Juilliard pre-college reunion. I went there just for 3 semesters, but that it was with Ardith Alton and all these young people, and it was a mind-blowing experience for me. It basically made me want to become a professional. Maybe more because of the peers I met than the teachers, actually. But there was one conductor who was there who was also very inspiring, Ronald Braunstein. And there was a reunion about 2 years ago with a lot of these same people, grown up like me now. And Ronald Braunstein came and conducted us. And it was so moving because he's still just an incredible musician. And I did write a poem after that because it was just mind blowing to suddenly see all these people I hadn't seen since high school, which is a long time ago for me now, and and to play music with them. So that, occasionally if I get really moved, I will write something out because music somehow can't capture it quite. They are connected though. They're different though. I remember when I was first starting writing poems for Kenneth Koch, he said, "This is way too repetitive." Because in music, you can say the same thing over and over again and have like slight variations. You can't do that in poetry. It doesn't work.
Hmm.
So, but for sure it's connected. Absolutely.
Nice. Okay, so then with the radio station, there the first thing that kind of comes to mind, it seems like there are a number of people who, of the people that listen to classical music, their favorite thing is to hear the pieces that they've already heard.
Yes.
You know what I mean? And then
Hmm.
there are also those of us who love to find a new favorite. Like, wow, I've never heard this piece before, or in some cases this composer before, and it's so exciting. And of course it's definitely possible to have a blend of both. But even with your interest in Franchomme, and I'm sure that it's not just with Franchomme, you seem to have that sort of interest in, oh wait, how do I find the next new thing that's going to really blow my mind in terms of this masterpiece that's just sitting there that nobody had ever told me about before. Has that always been a way that you've listened to music and approached repertoire?
Gosh, that's such a huge question.
Yeah,
Well
sorry.
done.
It is.
Let's see, where do I start with that one? Well, honestly, at WKCR, the radio station at my college, I would actually feature one string player per show, or sometimes I'd feature one piece for show. Like, let's find 3 renditions of the Sibelius Violin Concerto. So I was interested in things to hear things over and over again that I was familiar with as well. I still am, but I do get excited finding new things that people don't know about, that I haven't studied. Now that I've studied cello at schools and studied a lot of major repertoire, I do get very excited studying and learning, teaching myself something that there's no recording of, be it a modern piece or a piece by an 1800s composer that's been sitting in a dusty archive in Paris for a while, or maybe in someone's private library. And it's fun to explore and see what you can find. Honestly, it's not always good. I have to be honest with
Oh yeah.
you. I looked at a sonata recently from the BNF in Paris by a man. I actually can't remember the composer's name because it was such a forgettable piece. But it was so disappointing, because it was a manuscript and it hadn't been published. But yeah, not so good. So that does happen. But I had a feeling that Franchomme had a lot of good stuff that hadn't been discovered because I learned about him from Anna Bilsma's recordings initially, and then Roel Tien is another cellist who has recorded mainly the nocturnes for 2 cellos, which are some of his best writing and most beautiful works. And he wrote them when he had recently met Chopin, who was a very, very dear friend to Franchomme, and they actually influenced each other. And the nocturnes really show that, I think. And for 2 cellos, he writes so well for cello. He's not a great writer for the piano, sadly, but for strings, he can really compose. And so those pieces are exciting to find and to, in some cases, transcribe from manuscripts because they haven't ever been published. They haven't just been out of print for 200 years like the nocturnes. They've just never got out of the manuscript stage.
Now, here's another big question. Sorry, because I'm sure this is the sort of thing that the answer could be. I know there's a lot to an answer like this, but is there a distillation in terms of the what you learned from Eddie versus Winold versus Starker that kind of stays the most in your head when you're playing or when you're teaching?
I definitely think about things Sienna Starker said all the time when I teach my students. I found him incredibly helpful to me personally. He had an analysis and an answer for pretty much any problem you could bring to him. And sometimes he would even laugh at you. You'd be like showing something like, I can't do this. And then he would say something and I would be like, yeah, I still can't do it. And then I would do it to my shock. He's like, see, you can do it. But he just had such a good attitude about, well, there were a lot of things about that situation I liked at IU. All of his lessons were open. So we could go to each other's lessons and people would come to our lessons. Partly so that, Starker could tell jokes and have an audience of more than one student, but mainly because it was a good atmosphere people were studying the same piece that you were, maybe, and they had similar issues. And also it just kept it from getting competitive somehow, because despite his age, he could just pick up his practice cello, which wasn't a great instrument, and put a cigarette down, pick up his practice cello, and show something with such musical flair. And, what are you going to say? Why are you going to be competitive with someone your age when he's outplaying all of us, you know. So it just made for a collegiality that I really liked, and it was really inspiring for me to. There also wasn't much else to do there besides practice, which was good for me because New York City, where I'd gone to school, had tons of awesome distractions, and I took advantage of them. But there's a great practice building at IU. You could stay all night if you stayed in there when they locked the doors. You could just stay there if you wanted to, and a lot of us did. And it was a nice hang, and it's just also nice to hear how people are approaching problems in their repertoire. You can sort of hear through the door, what are they doing, you know? And it was great. I loved it.
Excellent.
But mainly his ideas are just what stay with me.
Yeah, and
about the bow arm,
right.
or left hand tension, things like that.
And how clearly he articulated them, you know, just
Yeah,
right to
they're
the point.
yeah. He has. I mean, they're sort of, yeah. He is a man of few words, which unfortunately I am not. I'm working on that, but well, I'm not a man, but I blab on a little too much sometimes. That's something I'm learning from teaching it. Say less. Let them try it. Let them think about it. Let them figure it out. But it had a lot of principles that seem simple, but they're not. You have to keep thinking about them, like string crossings and arm circles, and which arm circle is going to work from a lower string to an upper string, and how is your arm working at different parts of the bow, the lower half versus the upper half, and is your upper arm continues to move in the upper half, but you're also opening and you're releasing your thumb at the tip, so it has a nice smooth bow change, and again at the frog, and all these things that I really hadn't ever thought about. And they're instantly helpful if you keep thinking about them. And also a big word of his that I really like for myself and my students is the word anticipation. He used that word all the time for shifts, for bow changes. Some people like you, for example, interviewers who are very good at what they do, or radio announcers, they think before they speak and they don't say and they anticipate all of their words and they're very smooth. And he was trying to get us to be that way when we played. Just think before you do something. Think that you're going to have a very huge shift. Don't just, pray and go into outer space and hope that you hit it. Think about what anticipatory motion are you going to do with your shoulder? How far is your elbow going to open? Where is that note? Let's find it and hang out there for a while, and so on. So all that stuff is still so helpful to me when I'm learning lots of notes and I'm stressed out and I'm thinking, this isn't working yet. Slow down and think about some principles like that.
An excellent point. So often when something goes wrong and they want to blame that moment in time, but it was what was leading up or not right before that, the die was already cast.
That's so true. Yeah, it's like I tell my students, it's like basketball, like shooting a foul shot. It's not really. It's really all about what are you doing before the ball leaves your hand.
Nice.
Before your hand leaves for the shift.
Yeah. Okay, so now you have performed all around the world. You've performed at a very high level. I'd like to ask a question. How do you approach polishing something, not just where it's awfully good, but to where it's going to be there when you need it, whether for an audition or a major performance?
That's a great question. Well, I like to give myself lots of time, if at all possible. That helps more than anything. Excuse me. And say maybe if I can 2 months before performance, if there's new music, even if it's not new music, honestly, it's just good to have a couple months to get comfortable. Of course, if it's with an ensemble or with piano, you need to do that as ASAP, because that changes everything, and there's balance issues and tempered intonation, which you might not be used to because you're playing by yourself and you're putting all of your leading tones up higher, and all of a sudden it sounds awful. So things like that. So just time. I am reluctant to record myself, but when I do, I always think, man, this saves so much time. Why didn't I start doing this earlier? So that's super duper helpful. And yeah, gosh, that's about the main things I can think of, just allowing enough time and recording yourself and playing it through ideally with the person you will perform with. You can't always do that. Like, for example, I just played in Paris with a pianist I'd never met, and luckily it worked out because we only had 2 days and I was really sick. So, but she was great. So we did it.
Excellent.
Yeah, Kanai Endo is her name. Terrific pianist. But yes, what else was I was going to say something else, but it left my mind. I don't remember.
Well,
oh yes, I know. Play for people. If you can
Yes.
possibly do a run through beforehand, that would be ideal.
Right, right. And part of giving yourself enough time is a part of that, in order not to kind of stress oneself out, and which breeds tension. I mean, I'm thinking of young people who, when they tell themselves that they don't have enough time, then you can just see it in the way they have muscles fighting other muscles, and they're just a knot.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, I think if you have 2 months, you have time to practice things slowly. And you know, if, in a way that if you're only have a week, you may not feel like that you do have time to do that. And with a metronome, which is such a simple, boring thing to say, but honestly, with a metronome, not up to tempo, with rhythms, if it's like a lot of, you know, fast 16th or 32nd notes that in a run that you have to get under a one bow or something, I do rhythms, you know, very basic, nothing fancy stuff. You know, I didn't need any fancy teacher to tell me how to do that, but that's what works. And it works pretty quickly, but you have to have the patience to let it work, because it, you know, for example, one of these Ersan pieces, I just sort of threw on the album at the end of like kind of last minute, and I was like, oh, let's see if I can learn this fast enough, because it's really fast. And I just put the metronome at kind of a lower tempo, and I practiced it, and it's difficult because it's not predictable finger patterns or rhythms, even though it's just constant 16ths. Kind of like learning a Wagner, you know, overture or something, that, you know, one of those things where it's like you think you know the pattern, then it changes, and you're like, and you say you need a new finger pattern. So just really slow. And that one, that was so hard, I just did like 2 bars at a time, or maybe one. I would get through 1 bar and go into the next bar. And if you do that ad nauseum, you'll find that you have memorized it, whether you like to or not. You're not even trying to, but you've at least half memorized it, and then you've won half the battle right there.
Yeah.
And then it gets faster, and somehow it works by the end. Usually, not always, but you know.
Excellent. All right, let's talk about your CD. I'd love to hear
Sure.
not only about kind of what led to it, and what you're most excited about as far as the actual specific CD, but then also if you want to talk some more, you were just talking about recording oneself, and that microphone is so unforgiving. You know, the process of recording oneself also takes a certain amount of patience and anticipation. So let's talk about your CD. I'm very excited.
Oh gosh. Well, you know, what helped with that recording process of this current CD were the musicians I had playing with me. Spencer Meyer, pianist, who's on faculty at IU now. I met him when we lived in Washington Heights in New York, in the same neighborhood. And Julia Bruskin, who plays in the Met Opera Orchestra and also the Claremont Trio, and she's also on my first album, terrific cellist. And we both studied with Tim Eddy. I think we weren't there at the same time, but that's how we met, sort of. And just having them there with me helped so much. And I had great, really nice engineers who were helping us, encouraging us to get through things. And so I really, it's honestly it was so much easier than recording myself at home.
All right.
When I just have, my little critical mind listening back. So it's great to have a nice team like that. And yeah, I'm excited to get it out. It's been a big project. It's a sequel to my first album, which was all pieces by Auguste Franchomme, and that's because my doctoral thesis at IU was on Auguste Franchomme, and so I had all this music. Actually, I still have file cabinets of music. I have a lifetime of music to go through here, but so I had 10 pieces on that first album that were world premiere recordings of works that hadn't been recorded, plus some really good ones that I had heard from Bilsman, Jill Chen that I just had to include because they're gorgeous. The nocturnes, I just had to put those on there. But I had some new nocturnes too, and this one has a new Franchomme nocturne that's never been recorded for two cellos that I played with Julie. It also has Franchomme's transcription, I guess you could say, of his friend Chopin's cello etude, Opus 25, number 7, which is called the cello etude. I always thought it was called the cello etude because the bass line sort of sounds like a cello, but there are actually good reasons to call it a cello etude because Chopin had heard the cello solo that opens Act 2 of of Bellini's Norma. And if you go listen to that opera, it actually sounds a lot like the opening theme of the piece. It's remarkable. So I just learned that very recently, and Chopin had transcribed it up to C sharp minor, which works better on the piano. Lots of black keys. It's easier to get around. And Franchomme, when he transposed Chopin's piece for the cello, he put it back to D minor, which is where Bellini had it in the opera. And by the way, Franchomme played the premiere of this work in Paris when it came to Paris. So
Nice.
That's all just really fun research behind that piece. But I just picked it because it was a gorgeous piece. I didn't know any of that stuff before recording it, and then I learned that later when I was writing the liner notes. So that's also never been recorded in that version. There's another transcription, at least one other, that another cellist did of the piece, but this is one that Franchomme did, and we know, unfortunately, Chopin had died when he made this transcription, but he did a bunch of transcriptions when Chopin was alive still, and Chopin liked them. We know that from his letters, so I think Chopin would have given the stamp of approval for this one too.
Right. All right.
And then I also have a lot of more modern things on this album as well, because I wanted to branch out and get up to the present day. So I have a sonata by Charles Kirkland that's actually from the early 1900s, but it's very different and advanced for its time.
All right. So now you mentioned Honor Bylsma. To what extent is your own playing philosophy trying to be a performance practice,
Good question.
play as they did at the time versus this is how the music speaks to me. I'm going to try to interpret it how it just resonates in my own musical soul.
That's a great question. Well, I mean, for things like the Kirkland sonata and the Philippe Muller caprices, I don't have to worry about that. Right. They were written for cellos with still strings and modern setup, modern bows. Auguste Franchomme played with no M-pin. He played on all gut strings and a totally different setup. I had hoped to see what that setup was. I was able to visit his descendant who inherited his practice cello, but unfortunately it had been modernized. So it had ancient strings on it that sounded just awful, but which I replaced, but as a present. But unfortunately, I didn't learn much about, the cello setup. But I do know he didn't play with an M-pin his entire life. He refused to use it. So to answer your question in a very long-winded way, I do use steel strings in a modern setup, but I am fascinated by the original French editions of Franchome's works. They have his bowings and his fingerings are fascinating. There are a lot of shifts up and down. There's one piece which I don't perform yet anyway, but it has 13 descending third fingers in a row, which is something that Chopin used to do on the piano sometimes. Maybe not 13 notes in a row, but sometimes Chopin would indicate similar fingerings, portamento fingerings like that. And he also uses thumb. He's had an incredibly virtuosic thumb position, mainly in the upper registers. He didn't use it a ton on the lower strings, but he did sometimes. But the interesting thing also about the thumb is that he'll use it on melodic notes, long ones. Like there's a whole note that you would be really wanting to vibrate, and you see a thumb indicated. You might even see a thumb and a harmonic. So I don't think he vibrated all that much. But he had a very expressive bow. He had really cool bowing patterns that you can hear in one of the pieces on this new album. The Air Irlandais Verrier has variations with lots of interesting bowing patterns that he had probably been inspired by Duport, his predecessor at the conservatory. So I do try to use his fingerings, actually. They would have made Janus Darker make the vomit sounds, like the vomit motions that he used to make in our lessons if we do. Like he was very against shifts up and down in a row. And in general shifts, so they're all over the place in Franchome's fingerings, all over. So I try to do them as tastefully as I can, because we have reviews saying that Franchome was very non-flashy, tasteful player, very impressive, but not flashy like some players of his time, or just sort of quiet, spiritual, virtuosic playing, which I think is a really nice image and kind of relatable somehow to me. So I try to, so I suppose I try to be authentic in that way. I'm inspired by that image of, like there's one of the earliest concert reviews I found. It says something like a young man came and played a solo, and it was beautiful, and just there's nothing. I forget the exact words in French, but it was it wasn't flashy. It was just good and beautiful, and everybody appreciated it. And I think that was probably one of his caprices that he wrote. Those are in print, by the way, the caprices and the etudes. There's Rose editions of those, but what Rose didn't include were the second cello parts, which make them a lot more fun.
Yeah. It's surprising how many things have a second cello part. It's like, wait, how come I never knew this?
Yeah, how
That's
come?
really cool.
Because that's a great thing to play with your students. I'm sure that's why he had two cello parts, so he could play them with the students.
Yeah. And that student learns so much by emulating what the teacher is doing, to blend, match.
Absolutely. I mean, always just playing with people, whether it's your teacher or just a colleague, you just learn a ton from playing with other people.
Yeah, that's great. Well, Louise, I also like to ask a lot of people about motivation, how they motivate their students, because it's just kind of has become a bit of a idée fixe from time to time. I think maybe particularly with teenagers, they'll get in some sort of a rut. So what do you have any general approach that you like to use when a student needs a little bit of help learning to re-love the cello or the process of practicing?
Sure. I think we all need help with that, not just students sometimes. But definitely, I like having goals for myself with deadlines. And that's good for my students too, I think. Time management is a big thing that I work on with some students, because they have a lot of other activities if they're in high school, and just finding time for it. Even if they're not, honestly, not just in high school, younger than that. kids have a lot of activities these days, and both parents work, and they have to have activities because the parents need them to have activities. So, when are they going to sit down and have quiet time with the cello? It's hard to find time to do that, and especially by themselves. They're doing the hard work by themselves. The lesson's the fun thing, and then they have to go home and do the hard work by themselves in a practice room. So yeah, so I like to play duets, as I was sort of alluding to earlier. I like to find what they get excited about. I've had some very good students who are there, I think, because of negative motivation, like a parent is making them do it. And you can tell that right away, don't you think, when it's not coming from them?
Yes.
So that's a problem I'm still trying to figure out how to work on, but I try to see what music gets that person most excited and find a way in to make it his own in this case. Like, is there maybe is there a book you really like? Is there a comic you really like? What's the story with the comic? Is there a way we could maybe make a story go with this piece that is a similar? Let's use the same character that you just told me about, and let's put him in this piece from beginning to end and talk about how the harmonic progression gets dramatic, and then he kills the bad guy, and then everything's okay at the end, or maybe it's not okay because his horse died or something. I don't know. But just try to get their imagination involved in the process. If it's a more advanced student, we can talk about the nitty-gritty of theory, and what are these keys, how are they developing, and then put a story to that. But you can do it with more detail about what the composer's language was. Honestly, the only other thing I would say is, and this is advice to myself too, maybe don't spend too much time on social media or in general thinking about what is everyone else doing, how fast are they doing it. We all use social media to advertise about my new album, but it's not really healthy to think about comparing yourself to others all the time. It's actually pretty depressing, and it doesn't help anything. So I would advise my students or anyone to just go outside in a really beautiful place, listen to some birds singing, listen to the wind in the trees, go watch a waterfall, watch how the light interacts with the water falling. Go play with a 6-year-old who's not anxious about anything.
That's true.
Just get your head in a different place, and you may think, oh, but I'm not practicing, but you'll come back and you'll hear music in a fresher way. At least I do. So
Yeah.
that can help too.
See, there's the poet in you. That was very poetic the way you just put that. I like that. But it's true too about the comparing oneself to others. I think some of my least favorite
there you are. Okay.
some of my least favorite times as a musician, period, are those times right before an audition when they just have the one warm-up room and you're hearing people go, wait, well, I'm not playing it at that tempo. Should I be playing that at that tempo?
Yeah, totally.
Or just it's awful.
It is. It is awful. Get a thick skin. Put your little, I don't know, what do you call those things that you put on cake so the flies don't get to the icing? Just put that on you and try to pluck it out.
Right. It takes a great deal of this really internal self-confidence, doesn't it? To know the way I play this needs to be heard, and it is the way I should play it.
Yeah, I guess that kind of goes back to your previous point. What do you do to prepare so you get to that stage? You have to be at that stage when you're playing an audition or a concert. You can't be doubting yourself anymore. That was your practice room stuff that you did in the last 2 months or however long it took. So yeah, whether you feel like you deserve it or not, you better have that attitude, or else I find getting annoyed helps, or even angry. but I don't. That's really bad advice. For example, there was an audition I did recently where someone started playing with me in unison when I was warming up,
Ooh.
and it really bugged me. And I actually played a good auditions for whatever that's worth. But
I like that.
there are all sorts of people and tennis players who have talked about, does anger help you or does it distract you? I think it's ideally you wouldn't have anything annoying. You would just go in and be confident and put it down. And then also the other thing that helps me is not caring too much about the outcome. That's really hard to do.
It's
But
hard, but it's very helpful.
the times when I haven't, I've done really well.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
whatever that's worth.
Right, right. No, that's worth a lot. These are all great things to ruminate on. I always look forward to hearing my students' thoughts after they watch the various interviews, and I know these are going to be among the ones that stick with them.
Oh, please share the thoughts, positive or negative. I'd be really curious.
Excellent, will
'Cause it
do.
would help me with my teaching too.
Well, and we'll also for sure include the link as to how to get this new CD. I'm excited to get one myself. And
Oh,
congratulations. That's
thank you.
that's it's always great when it comes out. All the work comes to fruition.
It's a big day. I told my daughter, who is 6, by the way, that's why I was talking about 6-year-olds, that it's like the CD's birthday today,
Yes,
0 years
yes.
old.
That's great.
But yeah, it's a big birthday. And the best place, if you want to support the artists, the best place to buy it is off my website, which is louise-dubin.com.
Great. Great.
I hope you like it.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, and best of luck with the future projects as well. The next performances and recording projects. It's always fun to look onto the next thing too, isn't it?
Yes, I am on to the next thing. Well, the immediate next thing are some concerts around the album, but I'm using those to practice this new sonata as well, parts of it. So yeah, definitely. It's really
Outstanding.
interesting talking to you.
Likewise,
Great
likewise. Thanks so
questions.
much, Louise. And to
You're
everybody
welcome.
out there, we'll meet back the same time next Friday. Take care.
You had me at Jello, Jello. You had me at Jello. You had me at Jello.